been everywhere and anywhere building strategy, and you wrote your book as well.
Strategy is a process of logic that leads us from what's going on and who are we through to what are the big moves we need to make and how do we need to make them in order to be better, more potent version of ourselves in a world that's perpetually revolving, if that makes sense.
The world is just changing, and this technology is now here to really accelerate some of that change.
The truth is, the world is changing faster than most organizations are changing, and that's why we feel it's transformational, because what we're trying to do is accelerate and do lots of different things than we did before. The market has new expectations all the time, and if you're not better at every interaction, you go backwards because everybody else is trying to be better. Because again, this pace of change, this kind of perpetual evolution, AI will be, fantastic things that are happening with generative AI right now. They're kind of forcing organizations to say, how do we need to place our bets? Where do we need to experiment with this now so that we're going to grasp this at least at the same degree as everybody else?
Yeah. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Adapt to the forces from the outside. Are we really ready?
Actually, the
Hi, Garvan. How you doing? Welcome to the pod.
Well, Hesus, thank you. And it is my pleasure to be with you. Really nice. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one, Garvan, because you've been everywhere and anywhere building strategy, and you wrote your book as well. So, it would be great to pack a lot of insights here, right?
I don't know. Is that setting me up now for being a strategy vagrant or some such thing? But you're very kind to say that. And look, I'm looking forward to sharing with you what I can and giving you any perspectives I have, both from, I guess, spending lots of time with organizations, large, medium, and small, from my teaching work, touch on the book, of course, and just, sharing with you, Jesus, which is always fun, just to, the broader perspectives in what's going on and what's shaping the world around us and how we can shape shift in that world. So, I think I'm really looking forward to doing that.
And Garvan, the world is just changing, and this technology is now here to really accelerate some of that change, which we definitely want to unpack that. Well, Garvan, before we jump into it, for people that don't know you, can you give us a bit of a background about yourself and how you landed in strategy and how you wrote an awesome book around digital business strategy as well?
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you. I've my own advisory practice, which is probably the mainstream thing that I do, 101. And I spend my time split in a 90-10 kind of format. 90% of my time is working with leaders and their teams and saying, where are we? And where do we think we need to get in the context of all this change that you've just said that's going on? And what are the big moves we need to make? So that's strategy. Right? So strategies believe, but actually action achieves, and structures achieve. 100%. Right? So 90% of my time I'm in the in the trenches, Jesus, with those leaders and their teams, trying to look around corners, trying to set down the markers and put the flags in the ground, set up big programs of work, feel the change, see the change, but do the change, which is really important. So 101 is my kind of main vehicle. That's where I spend the majority of my time. So I'm working with large enterprises, across EMEA and back into the States. So, following the sun to a certain degree. But then I love the dexterity because I'm working with, so I spend a little bit of time with some founders, and then quite a bit of time with some scale-ups. And so I love having that dexterity. It's really fun. And it also gets to give me an opportunity to kind of look from enterprise back,
yes,
to founding and scale up forward. And there's a really interesting symbiosis. It's almost like an infinity loop that goes on within there. So I'm sure we'll talk more about what that feels like, it looks like. So I work across sectors. So I come from financial services, but I work in the sciences. I work in technology. I work in the arts, logistics, kind of across the majority of sectors. And I left 26 years of financial services for a couple of reasons. But in that 26 years, the first half was in commercial roles. So it was out front looking after my own customers and clients, and then building teams to look after customers and clients, and then building businesses in insurance, wealth management, private clients, also retail banking and business banking as well.
Nice.
And then I led those kind of businesses across multiple financial services organizations, mainly in Ireland, a little bit internationally as well. And then halfway through my career, I kind of got tapped on the shoulder before the financial crisis to say, would you jump into the heart of the house? It's kind of the best way I have to describe it. Right. So into the middle of the organization, into head office. Right. So I worked in some large Irish, worked in Bank of Ireland, worked in Ulster Bank, but I also worked internationally as well. I was at Danske Bank for 7 years. Mainly in Ireland, but I worked a little bit internationally with them as well. And the kind of roles we had, we got to move around internationally, and we didn't think about necessarily our geographical domain. We thought about our business domain or our professional domain. So you tended to employ that across all the regions that they were in. It's a really interesting organization. So in the heart of the house, I had responsibility for pretty much everything other than finance and people to a degree. But here's the thing: when you're working in finance, you have responsibility for finance every day. When you're leading, you have responsibility for people every day. But I did things like chief of staff roles, deputy CEO roles, all those kind of things. But my main brief in industry for that second half, that second 13 years, was strategy, execution, transformation, right? So strategy, again, my theory was always a little bit around where do we want to go, how do we get there? But in the transformation and execution, I was building digital teams, building data analytics teams, building customer experience teams, building agile operations, product development. So when I say in the heart of the house, I kind of did all those kind of roles. Worked a lot in tech as well, and had great fun. And what I've tried to do when I left kind of commercial life, when I established 101, I wanted to do more than just, and I shouldn't underestimate this. I mean, bringing my experience on the road and working with a broader, I guess, panorama or a broader portfolio of different clients in different industries was really what was energizing and enthusing and attractive for me. But I wanted to do other things as well. So I wanted to I wanted to work on some product. And kind of where I've ended up working on that. So you've mentioned the book. So I've written a book, but I do a lot of teaching as well. So I've, thank you. There you go.
Great book.
There's the plug. You're very good. So I started working with the Institute of Banking. Still work with them. Still lecture with them. So I was building programs and lectured on programs, and I continue to lecture on programs there, and I love working with them. I've had good opportunity now to work with Trinity Business School, and I'm just launching a program with the Institute of Directors. All centered around how do we execute strategy in the digital age. I mean, that's what the book is, and in fact, the book is really my way of codifying what I've done, what I do, what I've learned, and it's kind of my practice written down.
Nice.
It's probably the best, the way I can describe it. That's what I went in to do, and the idea of writing the book, and I'll come back to you and talk about this if it's useful, why I wrote the book.
Definitely.
But the simple version is, I wanted to see if I could do two things: write down what I thought I knew, and then, a bit like switching on the lights in all the rooms in your house, I wanted to look into every room and see how well it was furnished. And there were a few empty rooms, or a few empty.
That's what I was going to ask. What did you find?
Yeah. So I found some nice rooms, and they were all good. And lots of them needed a new lick of paint and needed a kind of a little bit of refurb. And then some of them needed a bit of more structural work, put it that way, and it was a fantastic experience. I've kind of what I wanted to try and get to is this kind of trilogy or trinity of being out and being active and advising people and helping people to undertake like really ambitious strategies,
Yes.
and that equates to transformation, right? So that, and they just call it transformation because there's so much going on today in order to take on really ambitious strategy because the pace of change is so significant all around us. But I wanted to couple that with teaching because I've always had a passion for learning, and then having worked with the Institute of Banking, they were brilliant to me. They gave me a great opportunity to kind of really immerse myself in what it would be like to actually think and build product as an educator. So I've got to do that now, and I'm continuing to do that, and I'm really enjoying that. And that spurred me on to write the book. I have a couple of other products that I'm working on, Jesus.
All right.
I won't get into them in detail, but you know, interesting things like consulting platforms. So one of the things that I get, you know, the way when you're and you know all about this, you know, the way when you're venturing and somebody asks you, you know, how should we think about venturing, Garvan? And you kind of say, or Jesus, and you might say, or I might say, what's the biggest problem that you see every day that people are trying to solve, right? So, you know, we often start there, right? So design
Yes.
thinking is very basic. It's the very essence of venture building, you know, product market fit, all that stuff. And the one thing I found in my advisory practice was the most common question I got was, so Garvan, that strategy, okay, that's great. Strategy is easy, by the way, because it's just a load of ambition written down and condensed, right? It's doing it is really hard.
Exactly.
And then setting up the big programs is really hard. So people then say to me, okay, so how are we going to do this? And then we start getting into, okay, so scope, and we need, you know, clarity, we need ambition, we need resources, and, you know, hard and soft factors, all that. But then we tend to say, how are we going to build the team with the chemistry and the capability in order to make this happen? And then the question that always follows, always kind of nearly get it every day, is where can we find some of those people? Because we don't have them here, or here in this team. Now they might be in our organization, they might be outside our organization, whatever it is, right? So this idea, how do you build these kind of teams with chemistry and capability to accelerate? And that's what most people are trying to do. And that's at the heart. So, you know, again, strategy believes, but structures achieve. So you have to build the right structure, the right vehicles to get things done. And when that question comes, where are we going to find the people? I kind of go, so I network. I try to find as many people as I can. And actually, what's behind the, as you know, my logo is 101.
Yes.
The 1, a 0, and a 1, and it each stands for each has a meaning. But the 0 in the middle is around practicing open consulting to close the loop, right? So my philosophy always has been no one person team, you know, in today's world, and it's really hard. You may find the exception, but in the main, I find there's no one person team construct, maybe organization, that has all the capability to close the loop, e.g., you know, to build that vehicle of chemistry and capability. So I practice open consulting, which is I go to the market with my clients and we try and find, you know, do we need a Jesus, or do we need a big four consulting firm, or do we need a boutique, you know, content strategy firm?
Everyone is at Hesus, Garvan, you know.
Jesus all the time, right? Yeah. And I kind of said to myself, surely, you know, if people are asking me, and I went, people are asking other people, so I went and asked other people, and everyone said, yeah, we're all trying to solve for getting the right people, because, and again, we can talk about this. It's really tricky, right?
It's tricky.
And we can talk about this, but actually the heavyweight part of digital business strategy that I've built is not about developing strategies. It's about building the capabilities and the cultures in order to execute.
And I'll double click on that, because strategy is very so people define in different ways by different people, by different strategists, right? Garvan, and I love where you say there you taking your experience on the road is really about creating that strategy, execution, transformation. I believe also that execution transformation is key. Action creates information, creates insights that we can actually iterate
Right.
on.
Yeah.
And nowadays, what we need to do is actually a lot of change transformation that reskill our people. Maybe those
Yeah.
people are internally and need to be reskilled.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to unpack for us here, what strategy in its core means for you, Garvan, for a
Yeah.
point, because a lot of people say, strategy, as you said, is missions. How do we really go about executing this, putting action plans, getting the right people? What kind of methodologies that we used in the past that you finished down the book as well, you feel they'll resonate with the audience here?
Yeah. Thank you, Jesus. So the couple of kind of headline things I would say in the first instance, strategy is a process of logic. And that's where I kind of start. So we have to say to ourselves, how can we build a footpath of logic that leads us from, what's going on, and who are we, right, through to what are the big moves we need to make, and how do we need to make them in order to be an even better, more compelling, more proficient, and more potent version of ourselves in a world that's perpetually revolving, if that makes sense. And I think you can use logic
Yes.
in relation to that.
Yes.
So in the book, actually, I introduce a 6D model, Jesus, for contemporary strategy, and it follows six Ds, 6 steps. And the first one is, and it can be the last one as well. But let me come back to the idea of stradaptability and perpetual strategic, development and calibration. But let me go through the 6 Ds, and then let's touch on how that actually is not just a linear, but it's a flywheel circular mechanism that we go through. So the first thing we kind of do is we go out and do a little bit of discovery. So we got to look out, because the truth is the world is changing faster than most organizations are changing on the inside. That's what we have this thing called this disruption. We all call it these names, right? And that's why we feel it's transformational, because what we're trying to do is accelerate and do lots of different things than we did before. But actually, you got to discover why. So you kind of got to go back to go forward. So the first thing that we do is we discover what's going on in the world, what's the market doing, what are the new norms in our segments or in our client fields, depending on where we are and what we're trying to do, and what's shaping the environment, and what's likely to shape the environment within which we operate and are seeking to thrive. So you actually got to look out before you begin looking in. So the first one is discovery, and then we do a process called detection. So, and detect is bimodal, and what I mean by that is we start then to detect from that discovery, where the pockets of opportunity are likely to emerge, and where the kind of headwinds are going to come from. So what could threaten, your business as it looks today, and the business you need to have in the future. And you're trying to start to create this kind of this outside in, but also this inside out picture. And you also, when I say it's bimodal, you start to look at the discovery and see what's happening on the outside. What does it mean for you today and tomorrow, threats and opportunities? But you also start to look and see, which is different for strategy, I would say, in the past, but you actually start to evaluate your own internal organization and its competency and its capability for change, because change has become the big I guess factor in strategy these days.
Yes.
Like, people are super smart. There's lots of material, there's lots of knowledge and wisdom, and the web has just done so many brilliant things for us, and just the way the world works today. So information is not lacking anymore. It's the distillation of information, and this idea of logic. So discovering what's happening on the outside, detecting what that means on the inside, and then detecting, detective work, basically, around how fit are you in your organization? Where's your core competency? Where maybe are there perhaps some gaps? And that leads you on to the third D, which is diagnosis. So what do we need to do, and what's the best way for us to do it? Are kind of the two big questions that you start asking as you kind of go down. And think of the 60s as kind of
The
almost a
funnel.
funnel. So discovery, detection, and then you move into diagnosis. So what are the things that we need to do? And you need a bimodalism in here. So present forward and future back. So, and it's this idea of, most organizations are not starting from scratch. So they're saying, so to protect our core and evolve our core, what do we need to do to make sure that remains not just relevant? So we're not just striving. We need to think about how do we thrive? Because the world is changing at such a pace now, and the degree of kind of new opportunity and new things that people are experiencing, and the bounty of new proposition, you kind of need to think about E+1. So I talk about E+1, and there are only two E's, E+1 or E-1, and it's expectations. So the market has new expectations all the time. And nearly you can say that the market is expecting you to be better at every interaction that you have with them. And if you're not better at every
100%.
interaction that you have with them, you go backwards because everybody else is trying to be better. Because again, this pace of change, this kind of, this perpetual evolution, which is just to do with the pace of change, as I say, but it's also got to do with this new frenzy of competition and this new shift to customer experience that we've kind of been on a journey on for the last 10 or 15 years. So you've got to diagnose from the present forward, what do you need to do next to maintain that relevance? Or you make smart decisions like, actually, that's not going to work in the future. We need to reinvent. Many organizations have to do that now. And that kind of is the other end of the bimodal, which is you go a little bit into the future and you start working back. And that's about harnessing innovation and saying, okay, so where's the market going to be, in a couple of years' time? And how do we start putting bets down now, experimenting, et cetera, et cetera? And AI will be, and all the fantastic things that are happening with generative AI right now, they're kind of forcing organizations to say, how do we need to place our bets? Where do we need to experiment with this now so that we're going to have grasp this at least at the same degree as everybody else, so we're not E-1, so that we can at least stay at E and push for E+1 if we potentially can. And then once you've kind of, again, think of the funnel, so you've discovered, detected bimodally outside inside, you've diagnosed bimodally outside inside, present forward, future back, then you get into direction, and that's where you start to build roadmaps and plans, right? And lots of people used to just stop there, but actually it's the plan is the most important thing. And really pushing organizations in. Again, I cover a whole section of this in the book, all moving on to how do we direct the organization, build plans, but also how do we curate, host, and hone the culture, because the plans and the culture are inextricably linked. Absolutely, and it'll all come down to that, and that's all about pushing it in, direction into delivery. So plans into action. So that requires a sequence of steps and the right mindset and the right kind of attitudes and the right patterns in a business. And that's where we get into product management and those kind of things as well. So that's 5 Ds. So direction, detection, detective work, diagnosis, direction. Sorry, I said discovery, detection, diagnosis, direction into delivery. But then where stradaptability comes from, Hesus, is from dexterity, which is the last D. Because most organizations I'm working with right now are not doing 5-year strategies or 3-year strategies. We're doing roadmaps, right?
Yeah,
we're doing roadmaps.
That's gone now in a big way.
Absolutely. So we're kind of doing roadmaps, and we're saying now, next, beyond. So this year, next year, a couple of years afterwards. And we may have longer time horizons. I mean, I work in health a little bit, and was with senior health team from Brazil, but 60 of them, and we're having this conversation, and they said, Garvan, we're building hospitals. It takes 20 years. And I said, yeah. So we still know we're going to build a hospital, and we still know it's going to take maybe not 20 years, but
I was going to say, send it to China. China will be done in 12 months.
Yeah, we just do, but you know what I mean in terms of planning and and through to construction and through to all that kind of stuff. Multi years, 5-10 year kind of programs. And I said, absolutely. And of course you're going to have investments that you're going to make. But you got to think about it slightly differently. So we're going to build a hospital. Yeah, we're going to place it. We're going to build a place where we can um, craft the professional expertise and the solutions to help people lead healthier, happy lives. And then we're
Nice.
going to hopefully use that as a destination, because ultimately we're physical beings to
Mm,
come and to have the physical interventions that we need, right? And that's ultimately what a hospital is. But we can define what that place and what happens in that place. We can redefine that. And we should build in this idea of being able to redefine what we do in this place and how we deploy solutions in this place, because the modern marvels of medicine are progressing at such a pace that if we
mm,
try and uh, build it for today but deliver it tomorrow, it will be not fit for beyond that. So we kind of need to start thinking about how do we be adaptable. And
mm,
stradaptable basically means that we need to build for adaptability uh, in terms of our propositions and our solutions, our tech, our organizations, our cultures, all those kind of things. But we need to frequently revisit, and we need to frequently learn from, and this is where we loop it back around to discover, detect, diagnose, direct, and deliver. We need to be in a perpetual state, a flywheel of saying, what have we done? How has that gone? Is it working well? Should we do more of it? What's not working well? Let's not do any more of that. Let's
mm-hmm.
figure out what's the next thing we need
Which
to
is
come,
key.
and we need to
What
be
not to do,
shape
right?
shift. We need to be shape shifting all the time in our strategic thinking. So some organizations, I'm doing this on an annual basis. Some teams, big teams, like big divisions, I'm doing this with on a quarterly basis. So we get together for a couple of days every quarter, and we kind of say, okay, so stop, pause. What's going on in the world? Discover, what does that mean for us? Anything we're new? Any adjustments we need to think about doing? Okay, stop, pause. Now let's look in. Let's do the detective work. So, how are we looking in the inside? Are we building the capabilities? What are we finding hard? What blockers do we need to take out of the place? Okay, let's re-diagnose what direction we need to take, and let's plan for how we go into a new era of delivery. We're still building hospitals, or we're still, but we're just going to do it slightly differently
But,
based on the
even
learnings
on,
that we have and what we're bringing in from the outset. That's a really long answer, right? But I wanted to unpack this idea of logic, adaptability, and perpetual calibration to try and answer your question,
well,
Jesus.
that was brilliant, Garvan. A lot of good framework. I think advise anyone to get the book because there's so many frameworks there, right? It helps you frame your thoughts around strategy and how the world will evolve as well. Digital business will evolve. Well, one thing you talked about there, Garvan, you talked about change management now being the big thing, and I do believe the change management is going to be a big thing playing in strategy. But also one of the things as well is around first time principles. Are we really ready at times really to come to these conversations from what you're saying and saying, actually, we're going to cannibalize our core over the next 5 years because we need to adapt.
Yeah,
That's the challenge.
yeah, yeah,
Adapt to the forces from the outside.
yeah,
And answering that one, I would like also you to touch on, Garvan, the next waves, the next big forces that you're seeing and how they will
yeah,
impact these digital businesses. Because that's
yeah,
the critical part here, shifting your mindset. You're being comfortable with being uncomfortable that your business could be, you have to cannibalize part of your business because of these new waves that happen on the outside. Right?
yeah. Brilliant
It's a
question.
hard
Thank
one.
you.
It's
Yeah,
very hard.
yeah, yeah. But let's unpack it, and and let's try and simplify it, because the world is terribly complex, and it was VUCA, it's now Bani. All these terms we have for just this, this you know uh, mush that we sometimes see in front of us. The most important thing we need to do as strategists is kind of break that down with logic, and say what's important, what's not, right?
Mhm.
So I think modularity is very important in modern life. And you heard me talk about bimodality, this idea of
Mhm.
future, present, forward, future, back. I think this idea of modality or compartmentalization is very important. But it's not. You can't, unfortunately, have linear compartmentalization anymore. And what I mean by that is, let's take, which was misconstrued, I think, for many years, McKinsey's 3 horizon model of innovation. This idea of, you're going to do some continuous improvement in the core, and then you're going to look and see where your product or service or region can extend to, horizon 2, and then horizon 3 is the blue ocean, the blue sky stuff. Lots of people thought of that as, we'll do a little bit of innovation in the core and see how that goes, and then we'll go and do some adjacent stuff, right?
Of the
And
experimentation.
then when we've got that done, right, then when we got that, we go out there. Not everybody thought like that, but I remember being presented with it in that way. And I remember, the way when you and I remember the was a lecture, and I remember them looking at me because I was browing or furrowing my brow, whatever that's called. My eyebrows were down. I was looking, I was going up, I was trying to calculate, and I was saying, really, is it phased? And we had a little debate and we didn't conclude. But since then, and from experience, and from working with leaders and organizations who are striving to thrive and who are thriving, actually all 3, and again I talk about it in the book, all 3 are happening at the same time, and you've got to set up your organization to perpetually push for E+1 in the business that you're in today, so you can keep moving it forward and keep it competitive and compelling in the market that you're in. Because if you don't, you're going backwards. There's only 2 speeds. You're either going forwards or you're going backwards, right? There's no stop because everybody else is pushing forward. So you got to push forward. If you can pause, you're going backwards. Because everyone else is pushing forward, right? So that's it. So you've got to be continuously improving, right? And continuous improvement is not about adding more. Oftentimes, continuous improvement is perpetual pruning. What I mean by that is it's about simplifying, because we live in the age of experience, and experience is about making things easier and simpler, right? Because the world is more complex. So to E+1, you've got to make it simpler, simpler on the outside, more compelling for sure, right? But mostly the job of present forward, in that kind of horizon 1 way is, how do we make this simpler? So if we make it simpler and easier to do business with us, we'll likely continue to attract the same people, or can have incremental growth, right? People are interested beyond incremental, so let's come to that separately. But incremental growth, present forward. Now, also, if you're making it easier on the outside, typically you're making it easier on the inside because you're taking out steps, you're automating, you're digitalizing, et cetera. So the opportunity to create capacity in the organization is like incredibly important, because again, with the pace of change, you need to be able to deploy resources on new bets, on innovation, and on that kind of horizon 2, horizon 3 work. But you need to be doing it all at the same time. So you're simplifying and making your proposition, your operation, etc., more easier to do business with and more compelling by the fact of pruning. So actually, it's not about more; it's about less in the core, right? So how do you do less in the core? To give more and to have more. When you give more, you're protecting. When you have more, you now are building the war chest for innovation. And then you need to think about innovation in the horizon 2 and the horizon 3 way. But actually, a lot of that is about building capability to innovate, and innovate while building capability. And that, again, that idea of capability and culture, because it's all the time, it's always capability and culture that makes things work. And then you start, building skills in digital or AI, design thinking, and so on, to really start putting your finger on, beyond the core, where's the next place that you should be. And again, you're into the discover and the detect. You're using that knowledge in your strategy to kind of direct where you want to place your future proposition bets, because again, the bounties that technology and new ways of working are offering to us means that we can think and we can dare to dream to be beyond incremental. And in there, we need to create the capacity to build capabilities and cultures to innovate and reinvent, because it's innovation and reinvention that are important. Because again, if the outside is changing faster than the inside, the decline is present. So organizations and leaders need to have the cognitive kind of model, and also create the capabilities and the constructs in their organization to kind of create this multimodalism, and lots of people call it different things, the ambidextrous organization. So it's the idea of how do you continuously improve and simplify forward to create capacity to build capability and cultures to innovate, and how do you do that to place your bets on the next proposition and on new potential market territories, because people have got to be experimenting all the time now. And there's a really simple rule around some of this, Jesus. If I'm not going on too long, right? Around
No, go for it, Garvan.
So there's a really simple, some lovely ratios. I mean, I just love science, and I love this idea of logic, right? So if I think of how do I practically deploy this, I'm thinking that my this idea of sustaining innovation. So from the core, simplification and so on and so forth. Like that's probably going to have 70% of your resources. And then people say, oh, 70%, and say maybe even 80%. But let's say it's going to take 70% of your resources. You're probably only going to get 10% return from it. But you've got a 70% probability that it's going to be reasonably effective, right? And I think that's really, that idea of resource allocation, return, and probability is a really nice equation for us to break things down and set expectations in an organization. Because I've seen lots of strategies and lots of teams and leaders get really kind of disappointed and lost. And they say 70% of transformations fail. I think it's because we fail to put these kind of structures and do these kind of things. But I also take expectation setting is massive, right? And so let's take in sustaining innovation, like present forward, from the core, continuous improvement stuff, right? So that's just sustaining, and I use that word on purpose, but sustaining where you are in the market, not breakthrough, just keeping your place and maybe eking out a little bit more. 70, 10, 70, right? When you go into kind of innovation, which is, what new products, what new territories do we need to be in because the market's changing and we need to be ahead of that and start to work future back. Like that's going to probably take 20% of your resources. You can probably expect to take, up to 40% incremental return from that if you get it right, if you go ahead. But your probabilities, probably back to 20%, to be real, right? And then if you go and say, okay, we need to experiment with some breakthrough thinking as well. So, what does the autonomous health organization look like? What does smart health look like? Or what does the decentralized finance in its fullest and its finest look like? Probably only deserves 10% of your resources. Now you have to be really careful about how you set that 10% up. Now,
and
if
the team.
you
and the team
sorry,
and the team that goes after that opportunity.
How do you set up the team? What kind of model do you put around them? What kind of rewards? What kind of expectations? And they're all very different things, right? So each of these kind of layers need to all run in parallel, but they need to all be managed independently. But of course, there's got to be dexterity to be able to see up and down through them from a leadership perspective, because you need to be constantly readjusting and calibrating it. This is going on. But let me finish out and say that it's probably only 10% that you're going to put out there. You're probably going to expect, maybe a 50 or 60% return if you now it could be more, right? But let's take the relativities here. But if you hit a vein, if you hit an artery, all right, you might get 400%. But if you hit a vein, you might get a 50% return on investment in there, which would be pretty nice. But your probabilities are probably 10%. So 10% resources, 10% probability, but you might have a very so those kind of ratios, and then understanding that you're managing a portfolio, because modern management is portfolio management. portfolio in terms of the initiatives that you're driving to protect and eke out and stay and sustain your business in the present forward, with how you develop new products and experiences in the marketplace, which is a little bit of future back, and then how you think about, understanding and knowing what the disruptive landscape looks like by doing some experimentation. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the kind of logic I use.
It does, and I think these days, if you're incremental, you're losing already.
Yeah.
That kind of way,
Yeah.
Garvan, and
Yeah.
what you just mentioned there, even the moonshots, right? The ones that you learn a lot, which you can recycle back. I know it's
Yeah.
overused. Tesla is overused, right? But how Tesla will go about healthcare it will be very different. How other people will go about healthcare, for example, right? Reinventing the healthcare experience, because even when they went to the automotive industry, they thought about it quite differently. But on this one, I want to segue, this new wave of AI and how you see it impacting now businesses, and how leaders of the future now have to embrace this technology and reinvent their workforce to work with these new agents and new assistants. What are your thoughts there, Garvan?
Oh, well, listen, I'm incredibly excited, and I really am about everything that's going on in this space. And because I see it, the natural progression of things playing out, if I was to frame it that way. So, so again, just a little bit to discover and detect, and then to go forward very quickly in practice, right? AI is not new. The idea of using
generative AI, the LLM, the transformer model, that was been a bit of a breakthrough.
The latest iteration, right? But going back to look forward, the idea of using machines to do some calculation to help us, to make smarter decisions, has been around for centuries, right? For a long time. But really importantly, because we're now beyond digital's done. Like most things are being virtualized, even if we as humans are doing them, the data is being captured. So therefore, the patterns are being virtualized. So the fact that digital is done is allowing AI to blossom and boom. And I kind of think that we need to again put a kind of a simple enough frame around ourselves to say, well, what does that mean for us? Well, it's about intelligence, right? So it starts with AI is all about giving us new toolbox of intelligence. So we take facts, and I think there's kind of three kind of clusters of intelligence that AI is helping us with. So it's giving us some insight. So it's helping us with new layers of knowledge, helping us see, trends outside of the traps of our own cognitive abilities, right? I think then that's kind of that's the looking back. We all know that, right? So it's giving us knowledge, but that's past. That's in the rear view mirror. Then I think it's helping us to look at the windscreen, and it's helping us with instinct. So on top of the insight of what already happened, it's helping then to propensity model and help us to see what might happen next, so that we might make smarter decisions to shape the future. So that's the second kind of cluster that I think of, and the most recent one is about AI is now helping us with intellect, and this is why it's becoming now much more compelling at a human level, because intellect, even as a word, so insight, that's fine.
What does that mean, right? And where does it go, right?
Yeah, we're not going to get to insight's great, love that, and then some instinct, and then you kind of go, what do you mean instinct? And you say, well, it's going to help us based on what happened in the past, maybe see if we can sharpen our instincts in terms of what's going to happen in the future. And then intellect is where it's actually going to do some thinking with us or for us, to make some decisions and to actually do things on its own. And that's when it gets interesting. And that really is happening in two ways. So huge amount of automation already happening in loads of industries. So that's where it's doing the simple, the dumb stuff, right? And again, linking back to my idea of innovation, sustaining, automating, simplifying, getting stuff done faster, getting the dumb stuff done, with the help of technology and machines, freeing up capacity for us to create. And now the AI is helping to be a creative tool. And I think that's where obviously the latest kind of realm of fear has kind of started. And like all things, like all revolutions that happened in the past, and like every revolution that would happen in the future, you kind of just have to go through the behavioral cycle with it to be naturally, and we're bred that way. Our physiology and our psychology is we've got to be a little bit afraid of it. It's one of the, I guess, if you think of all the heuristics and all the biases and the behavioral kind of economics that we have, but are very basic. We've got fight, flight, fright, freeze, all that kind of stuff, right? So we're programmed actually when things that are new come along to kind of be to be cautious, to stop, to pause. And we're kind of, I think we've actually gone through that, because I think last year, 2023, when OpenAI kind of hit the scene, we kind of had the year of, the big deep breaths and amazing and so on and so forth. And I think by the end of 23, most people were moving into experimenting with it. And actually into 2024, McKinsey talked about this in a fantastic article. They talk about we've got down to the business end of things, which basically means people have kind of figured out what it is and maybe where it could be deployed. Scaling it is the challenge I think most people are trying to work through now. But if you think about that cycle, in a year and a half, that organizations are not now experimenting with this anymore. They're really trying to see where they can deploy it. Again, in the book, I present a data analytics maturity model about how organizations can think about moving beyond insight into, insight into inspiration and into intellect. And you kind of got to go through those hops, because you've got to get the data right. And when you get the data right, and that's where actually lots of organizations had to go back there now.
Data strategy.
Figuring out they can't scale without getting the data right in the first place. So you kind of, as a full loop, right? So lots of organizations are really back focusing on getting the data right. When you get the data right, then you can move into get the insights, right? And you can't do the instinct until you get the insight, because you can't know what's going to happen until you know what did happen. And then when you've got all that pattern down, then you can start saying, well, now that we know what we think what might happen, then you just start applying that to automation, and then you start moving that into creation, which is the latest realm of that. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's applicable in every sphere of an organization. Again, in the book, I present a model where it gets you to think about where could insight and intellect and inspiration, where could that be deployed in the customer realm of an organization? So bots is the big place where it's being deployed right now. So how do we help customers, or help people to help customers, to just make quicker, smarter decisions that gives a better experience, and it creates more efficiency, and they're the two jaws, they're the two things, they're the two, let's break it all down, make it really simple. How do we give people more for less cost? So people then will buy more, and then it'll be cheaper to serve them, right? So they're the fundamentals of business success. Lots of other things like capital and all those kind of things to be thought through, of course, but at the essence of it, right? But it's not just in the customer realm, and it's not in bots and service, or in marketing, and insights for proposition development. They're all really important, just as much. Like, this should be used to help manage the risk of an organization. So, and whether that's the cyber risks, and that's a big. I mean, all the boards that I work with, that's in their top 3 or in their top 5. So people are really worried about that. Again, pace of change. How do we keep the defenses, secure, and all that kind of thing is a massive thing. Risk modeling, fraud alerting, all these kind of things as well.
But the genie's out of the box, Garvan. In a way, the genie's out of the box now. This AI, now Anthropic, there's, of course, OpenAI and Mistral, others. Everyone now can have like a master's level student, an intern, right? They're hallucinating less. The guys are getting better. They're getting better context with different techniques, right techniques. Now, anyone can have a master's student. In the future, who knows? It might evolve to a PhD student. It's a very different world now to do strategy in that world, whereby your customer service could be run by master students, right? And Klarna is a great example that just say, okay, Tesla again with X, they're running. They took 80% of the staff,
Yeah.
and they're still deploying in more products that they used to deploy in the past. It's a
Yeah.
fundamental shift that Garvan and the mindset of the leaders have to embrace now. This shift. I don't think there's much time to be thinking a lot about this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that sphere of the experimentation has to increase faster.
It does. Absolutely. And it's got to be 360, Jesus. So, so it's customer, this risk, but what about the, the people and the assets of the organization? What about the technology and the operations? What about partner management all around that? Because we have to ingest and use the capability of partners to accelerate and so on and so forth. So yes, it requires a different mindset. And it's a leadership challenge. It's a leadership conundrum.
What are you seeing, Garvan?
Well,
are they really stretching their minds at the minute to say?
It is, yeah. So I look around. I mean, the one persistent, consistent thing I see is pressure. Leaders are feeling the organizations. We're all feeling the pressure, Jesus, in modern life. I mean, we're all just trying to keep up. I mean, all this technology is supposed to liberate us, and we're supposed to 3-day weeks and all this kind of things. It's 8-day weeks, man.
Now you can do more.
So people are more confident, they're more capable, and they're more ambitious than ever before because we're being liberated, and we have more spoils than we ever did before. There's still terrible things happening in the world. Don't get me wrong on that, but lots of people are striving and are doing better. I talk about, and I'm going to close on this because we only have a few minutes left, I think. So I talk about there's really 3 important vectors that are going on for leaders that are critical: vision, values, and velocity. I sometimes present this in Hall's iceberg of culture, this idea of above the waterline, you can only see 10%, which is what's going on, but that's formed by the 90% of kind of belief systems underneath and so on and so forth. I kind of going a step further with that and saying, above the iceberg, you need to have a really compelling vision, because in an age where you can be more liberated, you can do more, you can be more, you need to be even sharper about actually where you're going to play and where you're not going to play. Right. And it also, second thing is, we're in Industry 5, which is, it's no longer about economic evolution anymore. It's now holistic evolution. So, and the difference between Industry 4 and 5, as you know, but just for listeners, Industry 1, 2, 3, 4 was all about, there were, industrial revolutions. Industry 5, it actually shouldn't be called Industry 5. But it should be about World 5, or it should be, Holistic 5. I don't know. I'm sure there's a better name for it. But there's this idea that industry has to play a role beyond industry. It has to leave the world and undo maybe some of the damage we've done. It's got to create a better place for us to live and to be, or because that's just human rights. And so there's a greater degree of importance in human rights. And then we've got to be more ethical about, how we run our organizations and smarter about it. So ESG plays out with technology disruption for 5. And I think leaders are now, trying to jump to that place, but it's more complex to try and do that. And then you've got the pace of change. Moore's law, just hasn't slowed down just yet. And actually, every jump is getting greater and greater and greater. The cycles of change, things of LLMs, it's, what's happened in the last year and a half. Took 10 years with digital, took 50 years, before that with the prior version, took hundreds of years before that. So pace of change, much greater complexity in terms of stewardship. And this necessity now to be ambidextrous. So that vision is really important. Then the values. Leading organizations now is a thing called constructive dissatisfaction. Right, so this idea, so it's E+1 actually described in a different way. So how do we embody this idea of coming in every day and agitating to say we can do better than we did yesterday for our customer and for our colleagues and for our stakeholders? And there's no room for complacency in an organization, and that requires passion. And actually, that vision is necessary to unlock, because the vision has got to be holistic. It's got to meet stewardship, but you've got to have a vision that gets people knocking discretionary effort to be constructively dissatisfied for E+1 every day. And then you've got to set up for velocity. So you've got to set up those kind of parallel streams of innovation capability. You've got to be able to product manage and work from the future back, but also from the present forward. And you've got to be stradaptable, I think, as we touched earlier on as well. So vision, values, and velocity, I think.
I knew this was going to be a brilliant conversation, Garvan, and I know that we have definitely go come back for another one, right, Garvan? But I want to just ask you two side questions, right? Just rapid fire ones, right? One is what would you learn when you're writing this book? Three key insights that as you write in the book, as you said, we didn't get to touch there. What things surprised you? And lastly but not least, what are you excited about the next 3 to 5 years? And seeing in the market executing around financial services, right? It's just for those listeners to the financial services, also for people that want to write books in the future, some nuggets they can take from you.
Yeah. So brilliant, Jesus. Thank you. So on writing the book, what surprised me and what did I learn? I learned that you need to learn all the time. So you know what I mean? So writing, I think writing as an art and as an activity is critical. Same as lecturing. So lecturing for me became, and actually before I lectured, even just talking in the public, panels, all the things, stuff we would have done before together. The idea of perpetually sharpening your pencil is critical. So writing, presenting, going out there with a point of view, getting to that end state requires you to think things through and learn and look at things, right? So for me, writing full stop and lecturing and talking and engaging is you all the time need to be sharpening your pencil. So the one thing that I learned is you just perpetually need to learn, right? So that's on that. And what I'm excited about in the next couple of years, I'm excited to see how the world can kind of harness it's how people can learn to be more adaptable and how organizations can learn adaptation. Because, in the 300,000 years that Homo sapien has been around, we just had to adapt every time, and we'll have to continue to adapt. But the cycles of change and the degree of change, if you take an XY axis, the curve is exponential now. So I think I'm really excited personally in learning how to do that and helping other people to do that. And I'm really excited to see how the world is doing that. I'm an optimist. I believe it will. I believe it's very challenging and very hard for people. But I would say go back to learning. Create time and space for reflection, refinement, and learning. That for me has been a very important equation. And I kind of leave that with you and your listeners, Jesus.
I appreciate the time, Garvan. I advise anyone to go and buy the book. It's an incredible blueprint. Garvan, where people can find you? I guess LinkedIn will be one of the...
LinkedIn, the HR system of the world. Absolutely. www.10onezero, and then the number one, .ie. So www.101.ie. Get me on LinkedIn. I'm active all the time. So please reach out. Delighted to chat with anybody. Jesus, looking forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for this morning.
Appreciate it again, Garvan. That's the pod.